Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Late Show. This is your host, Young Brando, live from Los Angeles. I'm just realizing it was a horrible idea to reach for a cough drop now, but I really do need it. I'm still feeling sick and still trying to feel better over the last few days. So I do apologize for sucking on a cough drop during the live, but I kind of need it. Feel free to jump on the panel. As always, we are going to talk about watches. We're going to think about auction results, look ahead to some other auctions that are coming up. And we are going to celebrate, of course, Father's Day, if that's what you do. I know it can be quite rough for some of us to go through this day. I know it from personal experience. I barely, and in fact, I never had a Father's Day where I was conscious enough because my father passed away when I was 3. He did leave me some great memories, some lovely heirlooms, as some of you might know. Um, but he did pass away very early, and I always remember him and miss him dearly through everything that he left behind. So if it is difficult for you to talk about, for you to share, feel free to ignore that call. But for everyone else, I do wish uh, happy Father's Day, Dr. Pepper. Sorry, Dr. Bob's Nightmare. Have you tried hot Dr. Pepper with lemon? I've never tried hot Dr. Pepper. Incidentally, it's one of the sodas that I actually like. Um, I'm not much of a soda guy. I love sparkling water, but I don't always drink soda. But when I do, uh, I guess simply it's because it was Steve McQueen's pop of choice. I like Dr. Pepper, but I've never had it hot. That's interesting. I'd never heard about hot Dr. Pepper. So speaking of some recent things that I posted on Instagram, um, I did make a commitment to post more reels and more reels where there is a likeness of me as part of the video will be part of the regular content. But sometimes when I'm on the run, when I'm running other sorts of errands, and when I'm attending to other kinds of business, I just post, as I always do, a lot of watch spotting stuff, of course, that's topical, that involves some sense of style. And you guys know I love my movies as well. So uh, people like Russell Crowe, I respect very dearly. And in fact, we will have an episode coming up of our At the Movies, probably in about 2 weeks, where my friend Aussie Expat is going to accompany me uh, through a journey to the far side of the world. We are going to talk about Master and Commander, and just in general, how great of an actor Russell Crowe is. He has apparently just finished filming a film on the Nuremberg trials, where he plays Hermann Göring, the commander of Luftwaffe, an otherwise reprehensible individual. Um, I really look forward to it. But he also recently had a sit down, apparently, with the British GQ, and he was wearing two different watches. And both happened to be Patek Philippe Nautiluses, which seem to have survived the public auction sales that he had after his divorce in 2018. So he was wearing the 5711 revival jumbo, so to speak, in stainless steel, and the 5712 in 18 karat pink gold on the full bracelets, which is the moon phase, of course, the asymmetric dial with the power reserve indicator. Speaking of trimming down the collection, of course, he had that public auction where he sold off a lot of his watches after he got divorced from his wife. But it seems he has kept his Nautiluses. So we were just talking about Keslovitz and his new acquisition in the form of a Patek Perpetual calendar, and how that also ended up trimming down his collection. This is very much the case, by the way. Hoff reminds everyone to upvote. I really do appreciate that. This is my silly little portrait for all your horological needs. I think it came out kind of cool, mostly to the credit of Vita, who took the photographs, actually. But it was a nice moment for me because I could insinuate my newest acquisition in there as well, which I unboxed on this channel. So if you want to take a look at that kind of content I have, where I unbox some of the newer additions to my channel, and where, in fact, a lot of our community members come on and unbox some watches that are near and dear to them, and some of their newer acquisitions, you should check out the unboxing playlist. And in that playlist, the last entry is the 14800 BA, which is the reduced size Royal Oak with the military dial, made to be worn on a strap. Still the only reference as far as the current line goes. Of course, most Royal Oaks currently are modular enough that they can be fitted with rubber straps or leather straps. But as you know, they have those male interlinks kind of dangling out and that get integrated to that strap. This was basically a slight redesign or adaptation made by Jörg Haschek, who also gave us the 222. So it has that kind of design where the strap goes in to the tonneau-shaped case, and where, in fact, the octagonal bezel itself has a more oblong shape. The watch is a front loader, like the original Jumbo, where the movement is loaded from the front into the monoblock case. And I also like the fact that it has this double initial déployant clasp that was designed by Emmanuel Git, the same person who designed the Royal Oak Offshore. So I like the fact that it has the signatures of those three big names in horological design. I like the fact that it sits at this unique place in the catalog. And I actually like its weight. You guys know I wear a lot of my vintage Rolexes on leather straps anyways. For something like this, which came to me at a very good deal as well, I'm very happy with it. I think I still yearn for a jumbo, and I hope I'll be able to realize that dream, but it's gonna come, hopefully before the end of the year. One of my favorite luxury bookmakers, book producers, Assouline posted this photo for the occasion of Father's Day. And I found it really fitting because they recently produced in 2022, of course, for the 50th anniversary of the design, a new book on the Royal Oak, From Iconoclast to Icon, that was penned by Bill Prince, and that's really, really nicely produced. I do have a copy around here, which reminds me of wanting to organize my library as well. But let me go pick it up from the shelf. I can still talk to you guys in either case. Wait a second. Yeah. All right. I don't think I have it at hand. Did I move it somewhere else? Maybe. Anyway, it's gonna take a long time now. I'll concede defeat and come back to my chair. So this is Prosper Assouline with Alexandre Assouline. And on this Father's Day portrait, they're both wearing Royal Oaks, matching Royal Oaks, in fact. They seem like 15202 in stainless steel to me. The jumbo that was definitive for a generation, basically. In 2012, it was reintroduced as the 40th anniversary model, even though it existed in the catalog before, with the proper aesthetics that relay or reproduce the original dial design as well. And this is the book that was produced by Assouline. They used to have these beautiful, like I think up to 40% off sales on the World Book Day. This time it did not happen this year, but I did get it in 2023 on World Book Day at a significant discount. Otherwise, some of these books, that's April 23rd, by the way, if you didn't know for one reason or another, some of these, overly produced watch books can be quite expensive, and when they're sold out, they also sell on the secondary market with a premium, much like the watches they depict and talk about. So it can be a tricky market, and a lot of it is really aesthetics, unfortunately, which reminds me that I want to do a series where I at least talk in a little more detail about these books and talk about how much value they actually bring into the table. Because obviously, you don't always expect it to be like Nick Fox's authorized biography of Patek Philippe, like his book on the reversal, like Bill Prince's From Iconoclast to Icon. They're not always substantive when it comes to the prose, to the knowledge, and to the history that they actually treat. But there can be still some value to those pieces, to those books, in terms of the quality of the visuals, the photographs, which can be quite close up and detailed in a way that can train your eye. I suppose that can be important as well. Having them as a conversation piece, on a coffee table is just great too. Nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, I think, one needs to be careful to navigate that market. And I think it's perhaps even more, can be even more dangerous, even though at a much lower price segment, if you really don't know what you are getting. Also on Saturday, Asher Asher and Gabe at Collective Horology. I don't know if you guys know this initiative. They're primarily based in Southern California, and this is basically a group of collectors led by Asher and Gabe, who set it up, that propose to a lot of times independent watchmakers, but sometimes also watchmakers of quite a respectable size as well, limited editions that they then sell with priority allocation to their members, to those who have been involved with them, who have been engaged with them, who have attended their events, so on and so forth. So they had an open house at the Astor, which is a beautiful members club posted up right at Hollywood and Vine here in Los Angeles. And it was an open house dedicated to independent brands. They did it in collaboration with Feldmar Watches, but also with Horology by the Sea. That's Brandon Skinner, who was there with a lot of great Habling 2 watches, everyone's favorite Austrian watchmaker. Other brands included were Czapek, Garrick, Spiek Marin, Trilob, Ressence, and Zeitwinkel. And it was a very nice crowd. I think it must have gone on until 6, which was the announced time. I left a little earlier because I wanted to have some time to smoke some cigars with friends. But it was a fantastic event where I got to try on a lot of brands for the first time, a lot of the watches that I've been looking forward to inspect in person, such as this Habling 2 chronograph, the Chronofelix Top Seconds. This is a design that follows after their Irvin pilots or Irvin pilots, designed like a classic pilot's watch with oversized Arabic numerals and a perfectly legible dial. It also has the cathedral hands, of which I'm not a huge fan. But as is your advantage with some of these smaller independent brands. Everything is basically open to customization, open to personalization. So in fact, you can change these hands up with, let's say, a syringe hands, which I think would fit this particular configuration quite nicely. Top second refers to this flashing second complication that basically exposes a sense of the beating heart of the timepiece at that through an aperture at 9 o'clock. This was a watch that was an official nominee for Petite Aiguille at the GPHG last year. That's the category reserved for watches, I think, priced between 3,500 to 10,000 Swiss francs. I think this piece is right under 9,000 in US dollars, if I'm not mistaken. And it is basically a single button chronograph designed as a pilot's watch with that flashing seconds indicator at 9 o'clock and a 30-minute counter at 3 o'clock with a beautiful textured black dial, kind of Fotina in terms of the coloring of the luminous material. Quite a beautiful, beautiful piece. I'm really this close to ordering one, which I might actually do quite soon. If I weren't simply holding out towards the end of the year for a 15202 myself, which is what I just showed, I think I would have made that decision right there and there and just given a deposit to Brandon. It's a very, very handsome piece. Very muted as well in a way. You know, there's not much that crowds the dial, which was initially my hesitation before I fell in love properly with chronographs, you know, moving on from time-only pieces. Dr. Bob's Nightmare, who's a member of the channel, says cool field watch vibes, and he's absolutely right. Field watches and pilot watches, in terms of the aesthetics, are very similar to each other as a genre. Obviously, they have different origins in terms of utility-driven timepieces, but because they both had a certain purpose that prized legibility, a lot of the aesthetic cues are quite similar. Black dial, oversized numerals, plenty of luminous material for the hands, indices, and even in the chronograph registers / chronograph hands, pardon me. So that lineage is for certain. By the way, it's if you're going to use the Lord parts, Alireza, it's Lord Hellespont V. But thank you for addressing me with my proper aristocratic title. Alireza is, of course, a great asset to this channel and a member and a very generous contributor indeed. 1314. Question for you: precious metal movements. In my head, that's not durable enough for daily wear, but that's just a guy bias. Any thoughts? Like the RG Platinum C, for example. Cheers. So when it comes to precious metal movements, those things are rendered in terms of the bridge plates and the main plates. Let's pull up exactly the watch he is talking about, which is Romain Gaultier's Continuum, which was abbreviated to C. The titanium model actually takes the integrated watch design to another level by rendering the movements in titanium, which is the same material as the bracelet, as well as the case. The platinum model still goes with a certain kind of aesthetic coherence and renders the movement in white gold. And in this case, it's the bridges that are in white gold, and in and of itself. Look, a lot of the old school movements, of course, use more more oils to even facilitate the smooth running of the caliber. But it's the jewels, really. It's the rubies that are set at those jointures where there's more friction. And that's precisely because they act as, I'm trying to think of the anatomical term in English. Sorry, guys, I've been sick for a few days, so these things are not coming as easily for me. But movement basically pivots around those jewels rather than the bridge plates or the main plate, which are usually the parts that are rendered in precious metal when they are. Of course, another brand that comes to mind almost immediately is FP Jean and their tradition of rendering the main plates, again, where everything sits on, and the bridge plates of the movements in 18 karat pink gold. Once again, I think those are parts of the movement which are not really open to wear and tear in that way. Depending on what the alloy consists of and depending on how it's finished, they can be open to patination or oxidization. I've talked about this, for example, in relation to A. Lange und Söhne and their distinctive 3/4 bridge plates that is rendered in German silver. And when it comes to that, let's see if this is, no, that's a Daymatic. For example, this is a Lange one in yellow gold. That's Eric Wind of Wind Vintage, friend of the channel, previously sold. Let's see if we have a nice shot of the movement. Wow, close case back. Okay. That's an early one and a rare one, but not what we want right now. Let's go for this. Can we see this? Yes, sure. Okay. So this is very close shot, and okay, this is much better. You see, this is a relatively early example too, because those islands are basically an adaptation of the original Jaeger-LeCoultre gear train as they translated it into the Lange 1 movement. The 3/4 plate is rendered in an alloy that they call German silver. It's basically a mix of nickel, copper, and zinc. And it starts its life with this unique yellowish hue. And it does actually take on patina over the years. So it turns more and more yellow in time. And I think it's kind of a silvery yellow, right? You know, so it generally gets this champagne-like tint over the years, which is one of the most beautiful things about a Lange 1. So all of this is a somewhat longish way of saying that depending on how it's exactly finished and what kind of white gold alloy Romain Gauthier uses, it can age in a certain way. It can perhaps gain that kind of champagne-like tint we're talking about, although it's really exposed to the elements within the limited space of that closed movement and through an exhibition case back. So any patina that takes on would be very long term and very subtle at the end of the day. So it's not something that would worry me, Ali. So I would say it's mostly an aesthetic consideration, which it originally is as well, right? Of course, there's the whole shtick that especially François-Paul Jean sells, right? You know, it gives added value to the watch. It really doesn't. I mean, you can say arguably it gives added weight to the watch. But having a movement in precious metal, does it add value? I don't know. Aesthetic value, possibly, right? You know, I really hate it if I see a precious metal watch, let's say in pink gold or white gold, and just a generic movement is used that the brand already has. So the rotor is rendered, let's say, in yellow gold, in a pink gold case. That kind of rubs me off the wrong way. Right? Just mix and match. Maybe I'm being OCD. I don't know. Maybe that's my fault. But at any rate, yeah, precious metal movement is an aesthetic detail. If it has wear and tear over the years, if it has aging, that would be for the most part aesthetic as well. I don't think it would really affect the physical wear and tear of the movement. But this is a question that I will also direct to some of my watchmaker friends and see what they think, because it's not something that I can comprehensively answer in each and every single case myself. This is what we were talking about. This was my first chance to actually see in person the Chronofelix Top Second. Great watch. I'm so close to pulling the trigger myself. I've always liked Habring. I love the aesthetic, which is quite austere, and this watch renders it perfectly in a very charming, sporty way that can practically go for a generic pilot's chronograph or even field watch vibe, because it is a single chronograph register, right, which can easily be mistaken at first glance as running seconds or something, right? Beautiful. I'll be posting more of the watches that I discovered over the days. Thank you, Ali. You are so extremely kind as always. I want to see what that sticker says. It says, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So that was the Chronofelix top seconds, which you can see in this link as well. And the other watch that I already posted belongs actually to the similar genre as the Roman Gauthier C that we were talking about earlier. This is the Czapek Antarctique with a salmon dial. It's the Antarctique S, as they call it, which is the reduced size model. I didn't know this before because I had never seen the reduced size model in person, but apparently it actually has a different design. First of all, and this is the easiest one to pick up, I think, the case, as well as the outer edges of the bracelets, has a very distinct chamfering, which I think renders that tapered bracelet design much more elegantly, for the lack of a better word. And the flanks of the case are actually smooth and grain brushed. The original design has these distinct channels, which give a certain, I don't know, maybe like a three-dimensionality to that design, which is something to be appreciated and make that watch look more butch and robust in a way. But I appreciate the fact that they actually made these slight design modifications to give a different feel to the reduced size model. The original is on paper 40.5 millimeters in diameter in stainless steel. The S, and this is the Salmon S, that's 38.5. And once again, Czapek, in the same way as Habring, is very much open to modification and personalization when it comes to the aesthetics of the dial. They have a wealth of options when it comes to dial colors, but also the dial design, right? You can go for the double index at 12 or the Arabic numeral 12 at 12 o'clock. You can go for kind of like a monochromatic handset with even the seconds hand all in silver, or with a red tip, or entirely rendered in red. And apparently you can also get a lot of these different dial designs without the dates as well. There might be a lead time for it. There might be a little bit of an extra weight, but it's possible, at least. I have to say, I really like this bracelet as a design and how it wears on the wrist. Having not lived with it, I obviously have a very limited experience, so you should ask someone who owns the piece for the everyday experience with it, but the design is maybe too cute with those tapered interlinks actually rendered in the brand's initial, the C, C of Čepek, and they are nicely mirror polished and give a nice visual play to that movement, to that bracelet. The movement, I think, is for many the highlights. Or before I get to that, of course, the piece has a nice interchangeable strap system that's, you know, maybe a little harder at first blush than you would think, but you know, simple enough that once you get used to it, you can easily change between the matching integrated strap, a rubber strap and a leather strap. I think they usually supply at least one of those as an option when you get the watch. I'm sure you can get the other one quite easily. For many, the micro rotor movement is the highlight of this watch. It's the caliber SXH5. It was the first one that they presented as an in-house caliber, in the sense that it was designed from scratch for them by one of their collaborators, and it is an exclusive micro rotor self-winding movement for them. It has 60 hours of power reserve, which is quite respectable, if not necessarily optimal, and it has those 5+2 skeletonized bridges, which really give what is otherwise a very pocket watch inspired architecture, a very contemporary and also suggestive feel. The micro rotor itself, the oscillating weight, is rendered in platinum, which fits that color scheme, and I think with the added weight also increases the efficiency of the winding over the pink gold rotor of the original. Again, this is a watch that I really like. Doesn't really excite me enough to pull the trigger at the retail price. The design of the case itself is not terribly original. I find it actually a little too generic for my taste. For it to be a genuine alternative to the Royal Oak or the Nautilus, in my mind. Again, your experience may vary, but I really like this too. So I do thank Michael Margolis of Horology Works for sharing this watch with me. Now, please do hit the like button while you're at it. Feel free to jump on the panel if you would like, if you want to talk about watches, about how perhaps it reflects or it connects to your experience as a watch collector. I am going to go back to look at and think about some of the results from the Sotheby's auction. The Important Watches one that's had wrapped earlier, and that included pieces sold from Sylvester Stallone's personal collection, and the fine watches, if I'm not mistaken, which was the online portion of this auction that finalized on June 11th. So just a few days ago. I will be taking a very quick break, but feel free to explore the listings at your own leisure, at your own pace right now. And if you have any questions about a specific lot, if you want to highlight it, if you want me to talk about it in some historical and orological detail, please feel free to send in a super chat with the lot number, and I would be more than happy to delve right in. I'm gonna maybe choose something here that you can take a look at. One of my favorites, the Smurf, while I take my quick break. And I'll be right back. Please hit the like button. Sort through the collection if you would like. Sort through the listings. And if you have a favorite, feel free to share so I can provide some more details over it. I'll be right back. Right back. Ah, that's great. Marine Layer, $9.99. We are back with a beautiful, beautiful super chat. Dealer's choice. Talk about your favorite lot. That puts me in a difficult place, Marine Layer. Thank you again for your generous super chats. That is $9.99 because I've already discussed some of these pieces on the live stream. I don't really want to repeat a lot, so I will choose something that I didn't talk about and that I like quite a bit. So it won't be from Sly's collection. It won't be from any other watches that we already covered. Otherwise, lot 67, which is the F.B. Jean Octa chronograph, would be, I think, a good example. Wait a second. This is basically the model that preceded the Centigraph, which perhaps is a little more technically exciting and a lot more sporty and with a more of a mainstream appeal, let's say. But the octachronograph, due to its limited production, I think overall, I want to double check. I don't want to. It's like about 300 pieces limited, and because it only existed in the catalog from 2001 to 2008, so you can see it's almost roughly cut in the middle by the transition from the rhodium-plated brass movements that power the early examples and movements rendered in pink gold that power the later examples. And it's the unique model, perhaps, in the Jean catalog then and now that has less examples with pink gold movements than the brass movements. So both genres, both kinds of it, and the numerous variations between them have their own charm, have their own appeal. There are only a little more than 300 of them made, and they're all quite sexy, even beyond the more limited editions. And I think this pink gold one is quite perfect. But I did talk about this watch before, so I'm gonna I'm not gonna drone on too long. It's a self-winding piece with that full-size rotor eccentrically placed over the rhodium-plated brass movements. And it also has the flyback function. So you can, in fact, reset the entire movement while it's running with that lower pusher, with the pusher at 4 o'clock, and it will snap back, continue running. That's the quick way to describe the flyback function. And you can see again the brass movements with the 22 carats gold rotor with that distinct barleycorn-like decoration eccentrically placed. And this was a piece that sold for 180,000 in US dollars. I want to see if there's one more thing, if there's another watch that I didn't talk about and that can still qualify as one of my favorites, Marine Layer, because I do want to give added value to your super chats. There's another one that I did talk about, which was Lot 102, which is a pink on pink vintage Patek split second chronograph that sold for 408,000 in US dollars that I also talked about before. I think the other favorites that I did not talk about is this piece. This is one of my favorite reversos of all time. It's a limited edition, something that was called the number 2. Exclusively made in platinum. One made in 500 examples. I really love the rendering of that movement, which incidentally, I mean, hey, I'm just playing along, but I'm not really doing it intentionally. Since my friend Alireza asked about precious metal movements, this is a platinum watch with a white gold movement. It comes from 2007, roughly. And as you can see, the movement is still in great shape. Because again, the parts of it that are rendered in white gold don't really see that kind of wear and tear. I always had a soft spot for a Reverso Tourbillon. They are not visible on the face of it, on the face of the watch, which is quickly remedied by the fact that you have the swiveling case mechanism that allows you to flip the watch over and wear it that way if you wish. And I've always loved the way they placed the tourbillon cage slightly lower in a way to make the the gadroons that frame the case shift just a little bit. That's, of course, a special rendering that allows you to see both of the faces of the watch at once. Otherwise, you have this face with the stylized Arabic numerals, power reserve indicator, which is an alpha style hand that's right under the hand stack, classic swords hands, heat blues, and a running seconds hand at 6 o'clock, which is placed in a subdial. Beautiful platinum piece with a white gold movement, one of only 500 examples. And $30,000. I mean, imagine not only a sweet deal for a tourbillon wristwatch, but also for this tourbillon wristwatch. So here are 3 choices for you, Marine Layer. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you got some value of that super chat. Thank you so much for your contribution. JB, again, one of the great contributors to this channel. He says lot 16 looks quite different. And by the way, we do have some other pieces that we can discuss, even if they're not my favorites necessarily. Yeah, this is an interesting one. 1803s already, of course, being one of the most ubiquitous vintage Rolex day-date references, are dime a dozen. I'm so sorry. But obviously, they are mostly found in yellow gold. The white gold and pink gold examples are a little more rare. Of course, platinum even more so. And this is how Rolex used to render the left-handed configuration, right? The destro, so to speak. Of course, there is the VTNR GMT Master 2 today in the catalog, the 126720 VTNR, pardon me, the so-called Sprite, which basically has a flipped movement where the date indicator has also moved to 9 o'clock along with the crown. Here, this is basically a watch adapted for left-hand drive to be worn on the right wrist, possibly, although not exclusively. A lot of times, since people expect that extra bit of bling or showiness from their day dates, from their president, so to speak, you will see the white gold versions of vintage day dates with gem set dials. This one has a blue dial with 6 brilliant cut diamonds and 2 baguette cut diamonds, respectively, at 6 and 9 o'clock. Of course, the date at 3 o'clock and the day at 12 o'clock. And this piece was unique enough that it also sold for or rather it did not sell. Is that right? I think it didn't sell. Yeah, it didn't actually sell. It had a pretty high estimate between 80 to 120,000 US dollars. I guess that didn't really attract any bidders because it is on the steeper side no matter what. And it didn't actually sell. It didn't close. That was lot 16. For an interesting example of a vintage Rolex day date, white gold on a matching president style bracelet, reference 1803, with a pre-auction estimate that was set in the range between 80 to 120,000, but it did not actually sell. Now, there were a lot of interesting examples on page 4 that I also didn't discuss. There's a centennial model of the Tank Centré, which is an increasingly popular variation of the Cartier tank. Of course, when you think of the Cartier coolness that was represented in movies, this was the watch that Steve McQueen wore. This was the design that Steve McQueen wore in the original Thomas Crown Affair. But more recently, I think the Tank Centré specifically was made more popular by some of the custom examples that collectors like Ronnie Madwani made with Cartier's program. And of course, Cartier also recently released a number of limited editions that mark certain anniversaries, and this centenary edition, this 100th anniversary edition, was released in 2021 in yellow gold with a hand-wound movement, kind of an off-white parchment colored dial with those stylized and slightly elongated Roman numerals, which are quite distinctive and signature Cartier, of course. Heat-blued stainless steel Breguet-styled hands for the hour and minutes, and a proper sapphire cabochon on the beaded crown. Very elegant looking watch. Of course, the curvature of the case, of the elongated case itself, is part of the aesthetic gravity of this design. And so is the red box presentation. This piece also sold reasonably well at lot 155 at 50,400, which includes the premium, but not taxes and other potential custom fees if you were ordering this watch from abroad. I believe lot 154 is one of the all-time favorites of this channel. Probably also possibly the most desired visual configuration of this particular watch. This is the famous Tortue monopusher chronograph from the CPCP, Collection Privée Cartier Paris. That was basically a venture that Cartier had from 1998 to 2008, where they were, let's say, crossbreeding some of the most iconic designs from their own catalog with high horology, the kinds of high horology and complications they had in-house, as well as some that were provided by emergent independent watchmakers. And this single button chronograph movement is exactly that. It's called Caliber 045 MC, designed by a workshop called by the name of Technique Horlogère Appliquée, THA, let's just say. This was a venture that is associated with the names of three independent watchmakers who are quite recognizable today. François-Paul Jaune of F.P. Jaune, Denis Flageolet of De Bethune, and Vienna Alter with his eponymous brand as well. As far as I know, however, this particular movement was a collaboration between only the first two, so F.P. Jaune and Denis Flageolet, who is the mastermind or master watchmaker behind De Bethune. And since they were already working on a couple of projects for Cartier at the time, they went themselves and asked, I'm so sorry. They went themselves and asked Cartier to see if they would be interested in reviving their iconic monopusher chronograph from the Roaring 20s, which had this tortue case, a barrel-shaped design that looks like a turtle on legs, hence tortue. This particular example is in white gold. The movement, I think, is very nicely designed, interesting architecture, and of course has that luxury touch with the bridge plates of the movements, chronograph bridges, excessively decorated with that double wishbone logo of Cartier. The white gold examples have, over time, really appreciated in the market over some others. And this particular one, with blue accents and an oversized single Roman numeral at 12, usually has the highest premium. Once again, I think this was a very attractive price. A multifaceted sapphire tops off the octagonal crown, which integrates all the functions of the chronograph as well. So start, stop, resets is also activated by the crown. A 30-minute totalizer at 3 o'clock, continuous running seconds at 9 o'clock. The rest of the indices for the hour markers are rendered as highly polished white gold beads, and the hands, including the centrally deployed chronograph hands, are of stainless steel, heat blued, and the dial, the rest of the details of the dial, including the finely graduated seconds track, is rendered in blue as well to match all those blue accents of the piece. As you see, this example of the reference 2396 at lot 154 was quite the full set, and it sold for 45,600, which is, of course, if you go back all these years, which is quite a bit of a bump. These pieces have appreciated over the years, but some of the oversized interest and the outsized premium seems to have died down, which is for the better, if you ask me. And I'm saying this as a big fan of that entire collection, the CPCP, so to speak, but also as a big fan of this particular chronograph. So let's go back to some other pieces that that have been sold on the Important Watches auction. An A series original jumbo at lot 172 that sold for 72,000. Again, that is below the high ceiling of the pre-auction estimate, and a sign of the times, so to speak. One of my favorites in terms of the modern lineup, in terms of the current lineup, in fact. This is the Royal Oak double balance open worked. in pink gold, the reference 15407 OR in this case. I don't know the list price off the top of my mind. I hope they list it still on the website. Yeah, it should be right over $100,000, six figures, obviously. But this particular example sold for $132,000, which again is on the lower side of things, including the premium. All signs point to things cooling down enormously, especially when it comes to the hype market. And my expectation is that this trend will continue at least to the end of this year, even though that is not an investment advice. An original Patek Philippe Nautilus Jumbo, that is to say 3700, with a slightly tropicalized dial that is signed by Gubelin. Gubelin is one of those prestige jewelers out of Switzerland that have been long-standing dealers of Patek Philippe. I believe they were originally set up in Lucerne, although I might be mistaken. And even though their signature is perhaps not as overly priced as a Tiffany signature on a Patek Philippe, it's still a nice piece of their history of collaboration. And in this case, it is on that black blue ribbed dial of the classic Patek Philippe Nautilus Jumbo, and it comes with the original cork box as well as the documents, which includes the paper as well as an outer box. And again, this was sold for $90,000 for just a couple of years ago, where any random example of a Patek Philippe Nautilus seemed to have become a six-figure watch. This is quite mind-blowing, honestly, for something like this to go for $90,000 on a public auction in New York, of all places, should tell you everything that you need to know about the watch market right now. Speaking of Tiffany signatures, there is one right here. Not the most desirable variation of the Nautilus for a number of reasons. One, it's reduced size. This is the reference 3800, which in its own time period, actually in the 90s especially, was very much a favorite and a preferred choice over the original, so to speak. It also has, of course, it is in bimetal, two-tone execution, so that takes away a little bit more of that premium, which the stainless steel examples carry. and the champagne dial, of course, rather than the blue. That's also less prized by the markets, even though by a little. We were just talking about, reduced sized watches in a way. I actually like the reference 3800 a little more than the original 3700 or later renditions of the Jumbo. I find its scaled back and more restrained nature a little more palatable for my taste. But then again, I'm not a huge fan of the Nautilus design to begin with. So I'm not exactly the most objective person when it comes to that. As opposed to the 3700, this piece also has a centrally deployed second sand, a sweep center second sand, which some like and some even prefer. Of course, that joins the fold, or that becomes part of the package, part of the Patek Philippe Nautilus Jumbo when with the 5711, with the 2000s and the reference number that was introduced in 2006. Actually, no, wait a second. I think there's 3711G that they introduced. That was the first revival of the Jumbo that also had a sweep center second sand. That kind of existed for a couple of years, or maybe a little longer than a year, before the new Jumbo was introduced with 5711 for the 30th anniversary of the Nautilus. And it was much like the 5811G, right? It was rendered in white gold. It was a little more exclusive, and it was supposed to kind of warm up the seat for the stainless steel version that will be introduced eventually. Anyway, still coming back to this particular piece, we're talking about 3800s in two-tone with a champagne dial, classic rib design, also signed by Tiffany and Company at 6 o'clock. This one doesn't come with any box and papers, but with an archival extract, which certifies the date of the sale, but not really anything specific about the dial or the Tiffany provenance. So that's something to keep in mind. But lot 183, nevertheless, sold for $48,000, which again seems to be on the lower side for a double signed Patek Philippe by Patek and Tiffany and Company. Lot 187 is for so many, of course, the ultimate grail in the world of Patek Philippe sports watches, or perhaps on luxury sports watches at large. a true application piece in reference 5740, line 1G, an example of the Patek Philippe Nautilus rendered in white gold, case and integrated bracelet and all, and with the perpetual calendar, beautifully executed in a balanced layout. The watch itself is also quite thin, which is part of the appeal. 8.32 millimeters thick, which is just a smidgen over the jumbo, over the 5711 and 5811 for that matter. Please hit the like button, by the way. It really helps for a small channel like this, just to get an extra bit of shine, an extra bits. By the way, Marine Layer apparently made 10 super chats until now. That's it's quite a thing. Thank you so much for supporting me so much over time. I didn't even realize. Maybe it's a recent name change. I don't know. I don't want to. There's usually a reason when people change their handles on YouTube, so I don't want to. I don't want to expose you in any way. You don't have to talk about what your handle was before. This is a piece that some of the most respected collectors even had to wait for a couple of years, if not longer, after they applied for it. And it already lists on the catalog for more than $150,000. I think the exact price is more around $152,000. This particular example, which comes as a full set with its original certificate as well, powered by the self-winding micro rotor caliber that comes from the lineage of caliber 240. Lot 187 sold for $204,000 US. $59.80 line 1A, the Patek Philippe self-winding chronograph with the flyback functionality in the oversized Nautilus case at lot 190, that's sold for $84,000 US. Again, the prices here includes the buyer's premium, but not the taxes. So again, seemingly an interesting price. Especially considering, again, this is a public auction in New York. Of course, the watch is naked, so that may have taken away from the value for some. But still, the final price was basically dab smack in the middle for that pre-auction estimate. If I'm skipping over anything that you would like me to examine, feel free again to go through the lots and let me know what you think. I have a couple of personal favorites here that I want to choose. Here is a pretty dope Patek, no pun intended. This is a 5230 World Time piece in white gold that was made for Bauer, which is a jewelry store in Bogota, Colombia. It was made in around 2018 for the 125th anniversary of that establishment that has been a retailer of Patek Philippe in the Colombian capital for quite some time. Only in 10 examples, with a lovely gray guilloche dial at the center, and with Bogota rendered in red on the 24 cities ring. Additionally, apparently, the badge, the symbol of the jewelry store, Bauer, is kind of embossed or emblazoned on the sapphire caseback, which is a nice detail to mark it a certain way, although I'm sure most people would rather see the damn movements through the exhibition caseback, thinking how those micro rotor movements are some of the best parts of Patek Philippe World Time watches. Of course, it's nice to contemplate them. At least you still get the benefits of that elegant, sleek design, because one of the advantages of the micro rotor movements is, in fact, with the rotor sunk on the same level as the bridge plates, you get a generally thinner movement. This was a piece that sold for 36,000 US dollars at lot 201. And it is a piece that you could possibly see on the wrist of a certain Pablo Escobar, I would say. Interesting piece again, and surprised to see it being sold so close to the lower end of that pre-auction estimate at 36,000 US dollars. There's so much more I want to cover here as well. This is dope. A 5078P, one of my favorite modern Patek Philippe repeaters. Remember, we did a whole episode here as part of our RAR series, references and auction results, dedicated to Patek Philippe minute repeaters. So if you want to check that out, and in fact check out the entire series of those, the entire playlist of that series, please hit the link below. I think it would be amazing. But this is a 5078P, so a platinum case, 38 millimeters in diameter, beautiful black dial that I think is a wonderful contrast with that platinum case. The Roman numerals are very subdued but elegant on this particular design. And of course, you can see that slide on the left flank of the case that allows you to activate the repeating, the chiming functions of the watch. The case design overall is incredible with those subtly stepped lugs. It has the look of a classic Patek Philippe chiming watch, restrained proportions, beautifully wearable for the kind of watch it is, right? You know, for anyone who doesn't think much about carrying $250,000 on the wrist. Beautiful micro rotor movements with an oversized oscillating weight that is counterposed with the governor, which is a cap that depicts the Calatrava cross in gold, no less. Beautifully polished hammers, stainless steel. With the cathedral gongs, the double wrapped, so to speak, along the periphery of that movement that technically allow for a longer reverberation. And this particular example is apparently offered with the full set of its accessories, having been bought from Tiffany & Co. Gondog, thank you so much, man. Thank you. Good morning to you as well. Thank you for the kind words. This was the 5078P-01, the 38 millimeter platinum encased contemporary Patek Philippe minute repeater with the black lacquered dial, Roman numerals. This is lot 209 that sold for $288,000 US dollars. Of course, it has that single brilliant diamond that is set between the lugs at 6 o'clock for the distinction of a platinum case. And that's something more recent examples of Patek Philippe platinum watches have. This is another platinum piece. This time we're looking at one of the highest pinnacles of Patek's complicated watchmaking. 5004P. Perpetual calendar split-second chronograph rendered in platinum. 5000P is a contemporary of 3970. So the case diameter is right around 36.5 millimeters, with that extra split-second pusher on the crown, protruding just a little bit more, with an opaline white dial and Arabic numerals. The watch actually has a very austere and almost monochromatic look, which is, of course, interrupted at 6 o'clock by a crescent-like opening that indicates the moon phase. Again, you have those subtle steps on the lugs that distinguish in fine detail the case making that goes into a Patek piece. Here's a profile. It's a pretty thick watch, of course, with all the complication that is encapsulated in that movement. It's a beautiful looking movement indeed. Carrying, of course, the Geneva seal on the balance bridge, appropriate for its time period and for the quality that the finishing, assembly, and regulation, of course, exudes as it befits Genevan watchmaking. This was the 5004 P-021, a beautiful platinum example of a Patek Philippe perpetual calendar split-second chronograph from around year 2004 that sold for $312,000 US. Now I want to go to another Patek Philippe piece that is also nice and complicated, but a little more humble, perhaps, in terms of the price point, if not necessarily a bargain. Another platinum piece. This is the 5960P. The 5960, before it was discontinued, was, or rather had become, especially in stainless steel, one of the fan favorites in the Patek Philippe catalog. I think the appeal is almost self-evident when you look back at it. This was a combination of complications introduced first in year 2006, which incidentally is the 10th anniversary of Patek Philippe's proprietary introduction of an annual calendar. The annual calendar is now a complication that many different brands offer, but Patek was first to put that, pardon me, rendition, you might even say simplification of the perpetual calendar into the market. An annual calendar knows the difference between longer and shorter months, but does not really have a concept of the leap year, to put it in the simplest way. So you need to adjust it only once a year for March 1st. And in 2006, much in the way that they introduced the combination of perpetual calendar and chronograph for the first time in 1941, they combined the annual calendar with their in-house self-winding flyback chronograph movements in a platinum case. The 5960P was in fact the first model to come out of this series. The platinum was the first option and one of the first Patek Philippe watches to offer this new automatic in-house chronograph movement, actually. And it also has a very neat way of rendering the chronograph register in the form of a single bullseye at 6 o'clock. In the innermost circle, you have a 12-hour counter, and then you have, in the form of two concentric circles, a 60-minute totalizer that counts on the outermost circle from 0 to 30. The numbers there are inscribed in red, and then 30 to 60 in an inner concentric circle. The numbers are inscribed in blue there from 30 to 60. All of that encapsulates also in a day-night indicator. There's a power reserve indicator right under the date window, which is situated at 12 o'clock. And that is flanked by two apertures that shows at around 10 o'clock the day of the week and at around 2 o'clock the month. The platinum examples of this watch have a nice dark gray dial, kind of an anthracite gray even. And here is a look into the movements. Also roughly a full set, as you can see here. That single brilliant diamond at 6 o'clock sold for $38,400 in US dollars. This was lot 196. There's a very good question that I'm just seeing now in the chat by Patek Chris, who is a member of the channel as well. How many of the Leicester City limited editions of the 5961A were produced? I'm not sure if anyone knows the exact number, Patek Chris. I'm not sure, but this is the watch that Chris is talking about. It's a very rare version of the 5960 in stainless steel that carries the blue and yellow accents of the foxes of the Leicester City team that is actually making a return to the Premier League for the next season, having come back from the Championship. They had quite a few ups and downs of late. They had become quite a respectable mid-table team under the leadership of the president, Vichai Srivaddhanaprabha. And almost miraculously, in 2016, they actually won the Premier League, which I don't think is a feat that can be repeated. But he passed away in a very tragic accident, I think not long after that historic title win, and the kind of fate of the team took quite a different turn almost immediately after that. The rumor was always that it was a gift from him to the coaches and the players. So you can say maybe 35 examples, at most 50, if he went with a slightly larger run, so he could give them out some personal gifts beyond strictly the squad and the manager of the team. Yeah, I don't think it's more than 50 examples. That's for sure. But 35 seems more reasonable to me. Let's see, what is the size of a Premier League squad? 25 players. Yeah. If it's just the manager on top of that, that's 26. His personal piece, 27. I think that's the minimal number. I would think it would be more in the realm of 35 easily, because it would probably include some of the higher ranked members of the staff and maybe the executive board as well. Possibly 50, but probably less. Coming back to the Sotheby's New York Important Watches auction, this is 197, the predecessor to the current reference 5172, a beautiful hand-wound Patek Philippe chronograph in yellow gold with a hand-wound movement and a pulsometer, which makes it an interesting example of a doctor's watch, we can certainly call it. The 5170 was released in 2010. And this one was the first reference to feature their in-house designed and manufactured hand-wound chronograph movement CH29, specifically CH29 535 PS. PS is Petite Seconde, referring to, of course, this running seconds on the subdial at around 8:30. The pulsometer is graduated for 15 pulsations, which means you can engage the chronograph and count the pulse of your patient up to 15, after which you can stop and have a rough reading of your patient's heartbeat, hence the doctor watch. The case scales right over 39 millimeters, which is a nice modern size with a throwback quality. Nice curvature on those lugs as well. And here's a look at the CH29, Patek's in-house chronograph, hand-wound chronograph movements. And this piece also was a full set box and papers that sold at 197, lot 197 for 33,600. Patek Chris says, I heard someone speculate 40 to 45, but wondered whether you knew. If you love Patek and this is your football club, it would be a dream to have one of those. I would imagine, yeah. The 5960A already, I think, I keep saying this, there's a lot I like about that reference number. Maybe I exaggerate a little bit when I say it's like a 1518 for the 21st century, right? Because I think it lives up to the heritage of Patek in rendering complications for everyday usability, right? When they introduced, first time in serial production, the 1518, a wristwatch that combined a perpetual calendar and a hand-wound chronograph under 36 millimeters, right? That was an incredible feat. I think for them to do the same thing in 2006, combining, their proprietary annual calendar with their first self-winding in-house chronograph movement with a flyback functionality to boot, I think that was quite impressive as well. And 5960, this is the second argument for its sake, is usually a great deal, represents a great deal on the secondary markets. I've also talked about this in a video not too long ago. Where is it? 3 Patek pieces that you can find under retail. This was a video that I did relatively recently, so feel free to check it out. The other thing I like about the 5960 is the variations, right? The watch looks, I think, very appealing and austere, but heavyweight piece in platinum. It looks very dressy and elegant in shades of gold, pink, and yellow. In white gold, it has that pilot's watch vibe with the leather strap and the specific buckle that they combine it with. Um, Beautiful blue dial, a very interesting piece in stainless steel combined with the beads of rice bracelets. I think that's the dream, and that has been quite popular for quite some time now. So I like the variety. And of course, the 5960G, the white gold model, also has those engine turned tops on the pushers that are a throwback to the Tasti Tondi, those extremely collectible round pusher Patek Philippe chronographs from another era. Of course, I'm talking about the 1463, right, with those conical top pushers that have the decoration. That would be the 5960G. Another design that I really like is this officer case perpetual calendar. It's not exactly a crowd pleaser, I have to say. Some elements of the design can be an acquired taste. The officer case with those screw-through lugs, as well as the hinged case back, is quite distinct and not always in line with the kind of simple conservative design that characterizes a lot of Patek's classic offerings. The spade handset also, I think, can throw some people off. But otherwise, what you have here is a very wearable and elegant dress watch that is rendered here in white gold 5159G with a lovely silvered dial that has this engine turn detail at the center. You have the moon phase indicator at 6. At 9, you have the day. At 3, you have the month. At around 12, you have the leap year indicator. You have sweep center seconds and a spade set of hands, which is something I really like, especially that elegantly twisted minute hand. And the date is actually shown on a retrograde indicator that has the date inscribed in the form of a downward facing crescent at the top of the top half of the dial. I think this is an amazing piece and very underrated, the reference 5159G, especially in this configuration. And this was lot 200s of the recent Sotheby's New York Important Watches auction. And it sold for 38,400 in US dollars. Once again, a full set. Quite a decent deal, I must admit. Also sold originally at the Tiffany Salon. Kind of a shame that it doesn't bear that signature, but I don't think it would be such a great deal if it did. It was lot 200. I think you're right, Patek Chris. I think the Patek's patent on annual calendar ran after 10 years, and that was one of the reasons why they did that clever combo in the 5960. I want to discuss maybe two more watches before I switch to the online portion of this um, auction. Fine watches that concluded almost a week later on June 11th. But we're looking at lot 205, which is a relatively modern, if not contemporary, example of Patek's perpetual calendar chronograph. Here in a pink gold case, part of the appeal of the 5970 to the collector is, of course, the size of the case, which is right around 40 millimeters in diameter, significantly larger from the reference 3970 that precedes it. So it wears much more like a modern piece. This piece has, as I mentioned, a pink gold case and a silvered dial. Leaf-styled hands, of course, a centrally deployed chronograph hand. The day and night indicators are neatly lodged into the chronograph registers at 9 and 3 o'clock. 9 has continuous running seconds hand and a day-night indicator in the form of a micro hand for 24 hours. And at 3 o'clock, you have the 30-minute totalizer as well as a similar indicator for the leap year. You have a pointer date at 6 o'clock that surrounds the moon phase indicator and two aperture for the week of the day, the day of the week and the month at 12 o'clock. A tachometer surrounds this dial on the periphery. The lugs have this kind of arachnoid inspiration, spider-like lugs. A very handsome looking watch, quite a modern feel, even though it has all the dignity, all the gravitas of a classic Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chronograph and the classic Lemania CH27 based movement to boots. Of course, you are seeing the chronograph movement in all its glory from or through the sapphire caseback, since the perpetual calendar module or perpetual calendar modules really more generally are on the dial side, so right under the dial. The balance bridge carries the Geneva seal, which once again certifies that this particular version of the Lemania CH27 is finished, assembled, and regulated up to the standards expected from Genevan watchmaking, and it has that distinctive cap for the column wheel as well, which is signature Patek. Once again, practically a full set with all the product literature, box and papers, not to mention the outer packaging. I think the solid case back is missing, and maybe even the pin pusher. But those things can be acquired. so it's not really tragic. This is lot 205 that sold for 156,059.70 R. Its modern brethren is the 5270. The piece has a slightly enlarged case in comparison, here rendered in white gold, 41 millimeters in diameter. You might say that the dial is neater, it's cleaner, with the indication for the night and the leap year through porthole-like openings that are situated at 4:30 for the leap year and 7:30 for the day-night indicator. The in-house movement that powers this perpetual calendar chronograph tilts the placement of the chronograph registers slightly off balance, so they are not exactly aligned at 3 and 9 o'clock as they were before with the previous models, such as the 5970 that we were looking at. But as I mentioned, this is the piece, Patek's first perpetual calendar chronograph watch in the modern era that is powered by their new CH29, the in-house conceived and manufactured hand-wound chronograph movements that you had just seen from a 5170. It is the same base that is used here, and that has the added perpetual calendar module, obviously. The case aesthetically is very reminiscent of the 5970, but slightly larger, and the watch is powered by an in-house Patek Philippe movement with a slightly different modified dial layout as well. This example in white gold. That is not accompanied by box or papers, is something that sold for $78,000 at lot 206. Let's look at the online portion of this auction. Fine watches, just as interesting, just as fascinating pieces. I'm gonna again send the link into the chat and let me know if you would like to, if you would like me to shed particular light on any of the lots, on any of these watches. I appreciate you guys. If you send those in with a super chat, that will be even better. Speaking of which, there's a question that was sent by Nate Dogg into the chat. What are your opinions at the 5212A? That is the stainless steel Calatrava with the weekly calendar being offered it from the boutique as a first new piece. I agree with Patek, Chris. If it's the first Patek Philippe offered at retail to you, you are doing well. I think it depends. It depends. If you really want to establish a relationship with the boutique, and if you want to build a Patek Philippe collection, not just one or two pieces, but 3, 4, or even more, I think that's a good way to start your relationship. If you're just gonna get the weekly calendar and maybe another piece, and then trade those for something else later down the line, if you're that kind of collector, I would pass. I think you can, nowadays you can get a lot of these watches not only at retail, but even right under retail on the secondary market, which means that if it is just that watch that you want, if it is just that particular piece that you want to get from the dealer, is it really worth the investment, right? Because really you can get a lot of, I think you can get the 5212A on the secondary market for around $30,000. I think the list price has already been bumped to what, 38, which is a little more than $40,000 out of the door with the tax. So that's a watch you buy if you actually want to establish a connection, a relationship. If you want to start a journey with that boutique. 38,650. Yep. So unless it's a watch that you are hoping to keep in your collection for quite a long time, and as your first building block in a more extended collection, stay away, because you can get it for much cheaper. And that's why, I'm sorry, again, not knowing your particular situation or status with that dealer, as a rule of thumb, if the dealers are eager in offering you a piece for as your first introduction, that's because that piece is available, right? That's because that piece is either already allocated to, or was in fact turned down by some of their more regular customers. So I know, coming out of a certain state of the market, it sounds very enticing, but unless you are going to build a 3-4 piece collection, or if you have an end game to buy an Aquanaut or a Nautilus at retail, I wouldn't touch it at retail, actually. And I like the 5212A, don't take me wrong. Ali Reza says, I like it when people say something is handsome looking. It's another way of saying unoriginal, perhaps. Ali Reza is always in the chat. I'm giving serious consideration to super chatting episodes not to talk about Patek. Amazing. Go right ahead. Go right ahead. I think I want to instigate now. So until a super chat comes, I will only talk about Patek. So let's see what I can choose here. Rolex, Rolex, boring, boring. I'll start talking about one of the watches that the pontiff loved so much at a certain point in time. The 3919, actually, when it was introduced, it's kind of this hot new thing for Patek. Um, it was marketed like a banker's watch, uh, an interesting gold standard, no pun intended, for a modern dress watch at the time. It was also understood in so many ways as the quintessential Patek, and a great way of beginning your collection. It's distinguished by that bezel that is decorated with hobnails or clou de Paris, and the dial itself is very distinctive, because it has that um, white enamel look. It's not a true enamel dial, but its finish has that effect, so to speak, of giving the appearance of an enamel dial with classic Roman numerals and very finely rendered small seconds track, black oxidized, white gold, feuille or leaf styled hats. Maldives, thank you, 99.99. Let's talk AP journey to Jumbo. All right. Well, that serves as a way of stopping to talk about Patek. I think let's see. Oh, okay. You sent actually a message on Instagram for this as well. Thank you, Maldives. Honestly, on the one hand, I feel somewhat unqualified about this because of my personal and largely negative experience at retail in contemporary AP. So I wish I could coax or convince Ali Reza to jump on to give me some of his perspective. But I have the feeling that a lot of your particular experience will really depend on the location and on the kind of people you are dealing with. An introduction always helps. I know, Maldives, that you are quite well connected to other collectors, first and foremost. So I would, whatever you are planning to buy, whatever else you're interested in acquiring as far as AP goes, I would suggest that you get your foot in the door, not just by walking in, but by being literally introduced and in fact taken by someone who has already acquired, if not one, if not a couple, at least one very aspirational piece. That can be also a jumbo. It can be also, like a Royal Oak, open-worked Royal Oak, ceramic Royal Oak perpetual calendar. If you have a friend, a fellow collector who has acquired these pieces at retail from a boutique, I would highly recommend that you go in with them and have that serve as your first introduction. I think the shtick that I was given when I went was that you need to write in 3 requests when you have your file entered into the system, which they may or may not enter anyways, depending on how they size you up. In my case, I think they just threw the things into the trash bin and kicked me out of the store. I'm just putting it a little more dramatically than normal, but it's not too far removed from the truth, right? Because I had 2 experiences, basically. One I won't even talk about because the Beverly Hills boutique basically gave me the runaround. Every Monday they would send me an email saying, like, what would be, sir, appropriate times for you to have an appointment in our boutique? And I would give them 2, 3 options. They would not respond to that email. And on next Monday, they would once again send an email saying, like, what would be appropriate time? So they did that to me for about 2, 3 months. I got an appointment with the boutique at South Coast Plaza, which they also have not registered. So they made me wait an extra hour at the door to enter, even for my scheduled appointments 2 weeks in advance. After that, I filled out the card or the information with 3 options for what I would want as my first allocation, or my first 3 allocations, in fact. And the lady who was taking care of me, who had before me spent an entire hour not doing anything but just chit-chatting with someone, a fellow countryman, let's say. I could see it because I was waiting right in front of the boutique, which obviously, is a fishbowl. Anyway, so she suggested against writing any Royal Oaks whatsoever into that first 3, which gives you the impression that to get even a Royal Oak of any sort, that you should get 2 or 3 pieces, right? That's actually what she said, 2 pieces, the third one can be a Royal Oak, but no promises, right? Which means that a jumbo, in the usual scenario, right? Someone like me from the great unwashed walking into the boutique, even with a proper appointment and asking for an allocation, a jumbo is your 4th, 5th, or even 6th piece. I think with a proper introduction, especially if it's either a high rolling customer or a high level executive, possibly, of the brand itself, that can actually pull in that jumbo acquisition, maybe into that first 3 as the third option. So I don't think what you're proposing here is so unrealistic. because you have the first one you have is the Royal Oak Offshore chronograph, which, by the way, I think a couple of years ago, I would probably be revolted by this, but the offshore overall as a design has really grown on me. I don't know exactly why, but I like it more and more with each passing second, with the full knowledge of saying that most of the offshore catalog is not for me. You know, maybe some of the more vintage examples with the smaller case, with the 38 millimeter case, for example, that's offshore triple dates. I think I want to say the reference number is 25807 ST. That's something I could wear. But something like this, which is a real man's watch, is too big on my wrist. But I love the aesthetics, actually. It's I like the kind of grayscale tones with that subtle blue accent, which is quite a deep blue, both in the rejo, on which the tachymeter is inscribed, and the blue chronograph registers. And I think, honestly, I like the offshore so much better on a rubber strap rather than their version of the integrated bracelet. Yeah, I think they would most certainly allocate you this watch, something like this, as your first. And I think you are probably, in terms of bumping up your sales history right at the beginning a little more, you're possibly better served than getting this than just getting the diver, which incidentally, both in terms of its dimensions and aesthetic, this is a watch that I like better than the chronograph. I never liked the Royal Oak chronographs. I usually don't like chronographs with a date window anyways. But again, depending on your situation, maybe even this can start off the process and start greasing the wheels quite quickly. But if the titanium chronograph, the 26420, I think is the reference, yeah, is what you want at any rate, I think it doesn't hurt that it has a bigger price tag than the diver, than this 15720 ST, the blue Grand Tapisserie dial, or Mega Tapisserie, I think even. The second watch you proposed was the Code 1159 Perpetual Calendar, which I think in the universe of Code 1159s is actually a desirable watch, which doesn't mean much, of course. But that's the 26394. And you went for BC, so the white gold version. I think that's more handsome than the pink gold. The Aventurine dial is quite interesting already, and it matches beautifully with that backdrop of the moon phase indicator as well. I think, all things considered, this is my favorite Code 1159, which doesn't say much because I absolutely fucking hate Code 1159. I think it's one of the most generic designs ever. Kind of bits and pieces taken from whatever seems to be hip at the time. I'm not gonna beat a dead horse, but gun to my head, this is probably something I would choose. I like the modern perpetual calendar movements of Audemars Piguet anyways. It can seem a little over the top because it has everything but the kitchen sink, the moon phase indicator, the leap year indicator, the weekly calendar. But overall, it's still a very balanced layout, um, as uncluttered as it can get with so many indications. Um, the Aventurine, even as the background of the moon phase indicator, always pleases me in this configuration. To have it on the dial is just an added bonus. I don't like the aesthetic of this watch. I couldn't myself possibly cough up 6 figures for a Code 1159 of whatever complication. But then again, if you actually like it, if you want to get into the world of AP, why not? And again, when thinking of these steps, as we were just talking about the 5212, I love Maldives, it's about what you are really seeking. If you really will get the pleasure of collecting these AP pieces, whether we are talking about the offshore chronograph that we were just looking at, or this Code 1159 perpetual calendar, by all means. However, if the Jumbo is the only watch you actually want from AP at this present time, if you think that you will want to quickly, even eventually, move on from these pieces, which will, at least in short term, most certainly lose you money, I would say just go onto the secondary market and buy a 16202. I know they carry a lot of premium, but that premium is eroding, is melting away with each passing day, more or less. I think if you were to go onto the secondary market today and, genuinely from a relatively, from a dealer with whom you are relatively well connected, um, and haggle just a little bit, the premium is basically 100%. It's double the retail price. So you can get a Jumbo probably today for $65,000 on the secondary market. You can get a 16202 for $65,000. Easily under 70,000, but I think you can get, with a little bit looking around, with a little bit negotiation, you can get an unworn example of it. So is it in that case worth it to pursue it at retail? If that's the satisfaction you're seeking purely, how can I reach the Jumbo at retail? Buying these pieces that I don't really want, but I could have in my collection, at least for the present time. I think that's running up your bill quite fast, and quite high right away. Right? That's $150,000 off the bat, even if they give you the Jumbo as your third piece. So it adds up to basically $185,000 if they allocate you the 16202 stainless steel as your third piece. So if that's what you want, would you rather pay $30,000 to $35,000 in premium to get it now, as the watch you actually want now, or would you rather spend $150,000 at least, if not more, to get the watch at $33,000 to $35,000? I think that would be my question, Maldives. Because I think a collector like you, they would allocate you the jumbo, and I think, you know, it's not unrealistic to think of it again, someone like you being introduced by another, you know, respectable collector known personally to that AP boutique, to have shopped with them, to have acquired some of the more aspirational pieces. I think you can get it as your third piece. I do believe in that. I would like to talk to some other people who have recently gone through this experience, gone through this journey, right now in front of you. Because the few people I know who do have a 16202 either have very deep connections with the brands, like, you know, someone who played golf with the CEO, for example, and that guy, I think, just bought that. I don't even think he has an AP collection. I know a couple of other people who have the new jumbo, and yeah, I think, yeah, those people, I think, have probably have had accounts with AP for a long time, you know, having bought maybe half a dozen watches from them. I know yet another person who has bought half a dozen watches or more from the AP Beverly Hills boutique, and they still don't give him the 16202, the new jumbo. So I think it's really more than your specific purchase history per se. I think it's really about who you know and who you are dealing with. And you can start working both of those factors, both of those elements in your advantage if you just get introduced by someone, rather than, you know, rather than just using your own muscles, so to speak. Yeah, it's already 36,000, by the way. So it did get like a almost a 10% bump very recently. And think about that too, right? In the time it takes for them to allocate you 1, 2, 3 watches, there's a good chance that this will be $40,000. What the fuck? I mean, you know, you remember a relatively positive story from our community here, Swiss or Peruka, who got the 555, right? This piece. No, 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 not this one. Sorry, 555, as I said. this piece. He basically waited almost 3 years, he was telling me last time, because he got on the list at the boutique for the previous reference of the 37 millimeter Royal Oak with the white dial, which didn't even exist in this generation, the white dial I'm talking about. And he basically ended up finding another connection and was allocated this with the hotter and more hype ice blue dial, which I think he still likes the white dial better. But it was not exactly what he wanted. But that aside, I think when he signed up for this, when he got on the wait list, the 37 millimeter Royal Oak was around $20,000, maybe. Replacing the 15450, I think, was what it was. I think that was around $20,000 when Swiss supposedly signed up, and he got this piece around 27,000. So, that's almost a 33% bump. Yeah. But yeah, that's the Memovox. That's the AP Beverly Hills boutique for you. They're one of the most corrupt authorized dealers of anything, really, not only of watches or of AP, but they're probably the most corrupt dealers of anything that I've ever experienced in my entire life. Like, if you just go in and buy watches from them, there's no way that they will ever give you something half desirable, something aspirational. You have to know someone. You have to be introduced in the proper way. You have to have connections. The sales associate has to like you, warm up to you immediately, and know you as the friend of this or that. Otherwise you are forever out of that circle. Doesn't matter what you buy from them. They will never try to give you exactly what they want, unless they have to. If you're a little more insistent, and finally, after some years, there's one that just didn't get allocated. They gave it to someone who had to turn it down at the time. They called someone else who happened to be abroad, and they called a third person who wasn't really interested or who couldn't swing it at the time. Maybe as a fourth person, they will get to you, because that's just how they work. Otherwise, they would rather probably allocate it to someone who has who has just better connections or an even higher purchase history. That's the problem with the ultra desirable pieces when they come through these kinds of locations. Once Patek got hot, imagine the kind of competition they had for some of the pieces at the Tiffany Salon in New York City. That must have been crazy to get a specific kind of allocation through Tiffany New York City at that time. I can't even imagine it now. So when you are looking for those things, like Grandmaster chimes and rainbow Daytonas and ceramic AP Royal Oak perpetual calendars of this world. Being in these kinds of major hubs actually can work against you, because even if you are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, there is someone who has been spending millions and millions of dollars, perhaps in that boutique, perhaps in other boutiques that are connected to it, through the same network, through the same company, even from other brands. Watch Time is the culprit here. Let's just name them quite clearly. There will be people who have spent literally millions and millions of dollars from them over the years, buying the entire Rolex catalog, APs to the tune of at least $50,000 to $100,000, a couple of Richard Milles, millions of dollars. So how are you gonna buy, 6 different Royal Oak offshores and expect to get a jumbo unless you have a connection from within that crowd? So that's exactly what I'm trying to talk about. I think the best advice for that journey, and take it with a pinch of salt, because I'm too bitter and too cynical about AP at present time, would be by having the right connection. Because anything else, even when you spend a considerable amount of money, puts you at a certain disadvantage. That being said, I think if you're introduced by an established collector who has already acquired some aspirational, some desirable pieces from that boutique, I don't think it's unrealistic to get it as your third piece. But you will have already spent around $150,000 at least. Those pieces themselves might take at least months to allocate, which means by the end of that journey, you may have even paid more than 40,000 plus for the jumbo, for the 16202, which is a watch you can get today for $65,000. Is the journey worth it? Do you really want to build a collection of AP from pieces that you kind of want, but not really, with pieces that you mostly think of as your, stepping stones, as parts of your end game to the jumbo? Again, this is just the perspective of a bitter, vintage smitten, and very cynical collector who has never played AD games at any level. So that will be the grain of salt. Memovox says it certainly wouldn't be unrealistic to get an allocation after 3 purchases here in Denmark. I think, again, for the right kind of clients, it's not unrealistic to think of it after 2 big tickets or 3 pieces. I don't think that's unrealistic. But in the US, especially in big cities, you have to have the right connections. And I don't think that rule of thumb necessarily changes where you go elsewhere. You know, if you think, Memovox, that it's already realistic to get it as your fourth allocation, it means with a certain connection, you can get it as your third allocation. If you have any further questions, I heart Maldives, of course, feel free to just type them in the chats. That was a very generous contribution, so you don't necessarily have to give more. If you have any questions, feel free to just type them in the chats. I appreciate you. We will also do Arno's watches next week. Feel free to send me an Instagram message with your preference for the time, and I would more than happily schedule it around you. You know, Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, or Friday works just great for me. You pick your day, and we go from there. So now, coming back to surveying some of the auction results, we are looking at fine watches by Sotheby's New York. This was the online component of the auction that we looked at. You guys know I'm a big fan of the Reverso, but I'm also always on the market for the ultra thin series that were quite popular at or around the 80th anniversary of the model, 2011. Of course, the stainless steel pieces, especially the US limited editions with the syringe hands, are extremely popular, but the precious metal versions are also, I think, quite underrated, and on the secondary market can sometimes be found for really good bargains. You guys know, as much as Jaeger-LeCoultre is known for the Reverso, they have also traditionally specialized in ultra-thin movements. So it seems like the perfect combination. Of course, the great example of those ultra-thin movements are some of the self-winding movements that they provided to the so-called Big Three, to specifically Audemars Piguet, Royal Oak, Patek Philippe Nautilus, and Vacheron Constantin 222, the big trilogy of the 70s pieces that all ran on some version of the JLC caliber 920. This is, of course, a hand-wound movement, which is more appropriate for a Reverso. The piece is only 7.4 millimeters thick. So it does live up to the ultra-thin name. It is rendered in pink gold in a Grantaille case that measures 27.5 millimeters by 46.5. This particular example came with box and papers, and in fact, a full set. The case back is a blank canvas, which can still be engraved and even decorated with an enamel painting by Jaeger-LeCoultre, if you so choose. The 2011 version of the pink gold model has this silvered white dial, or rather like an opaline white dial, that has this Fotina effect that it combines with sword style pink gold hands. There was also a chocolate brown version, or rather a version of this with a chocolate brown dial that came out in 2014 that I like even more. But this was the version of the pink gold ultra thin reverso that Jay-Z actually has in the collection, and that he got decorated with an engraving of the Carnegie Hall on the caseback to commemorate his residency there. This was a limited series of 500 pieces. And lot 308 sold for $10,200 US. Memovox says it's a cultural thing. We have the lowest corruption in the world here. Yeah, I believe you. I spent a little more time in Sweden than Denmark. And I know you might be offended by this comment, but I will take the liberty to use some of my experience in Sweden for Denmark as well. But I feel, I feel that those Scandinavian countries are simply run better. I mean, Norway is another great example. Again, not to offend anyone's sensibilities. I know these are independent countries with their distinct histories, and I know you guys kind of I won't say hate, of course, but like you have that narcissism of small differences thing going on. But taking a step back, a lot of it seems very similar. But compare a country like Norway with Saudi Arabia or Qatar. Norway is an oil-rich country. So they have those wealth funds that similar countries have. Do you see Norway buying a team in the Premier League? And trust me, there are a lot of people in quote-unquote Scandinavia who would rather support a Premier League team than their own. I know a lot of Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian people who are much more passionate about Chelsea, Leeds United, Liverpool, Man United, etc., compared to Brøndby, Copenhagen, Göteborg, Rosenborg, and whatever else, Molde, so on and so forth. So wouldn't they like to buy a team? No. They save that fucking money for future generations, right? They invest in ways of sustainable natural resources. That the electric cars and all the pipe dreams that we had in our futuristic fantasies. What does Qatar do? What does Emirates do? What does Saudi Arabia do? They buy 1, 2, 3 different clubs in Europe and play around with that money. It is a cultural thing indeed, Memovox, and you are doing great. Memovox says the Scandinavian countries are basically very old and small tribes. We have homogeneity, and out of this comes trust. The Nordic model of society couldn't exist without trust. That's a very nice perspective. And honestly, broadly, I can't disagree. You know, I'm not saying everyone should try to copy and try to become like Denmark, like Sweden, like Norway. But for this particular thing, right, you know, that Norway being an oil-rich country, holding, you know, the wealth of the country in a single trust, again, no pun intended, look at what they do and look at what some of the Gulf Arab countries do with the money that is generated by natural resources. I rest my case. You know, and I hope that doesn't offend anyone's sensibilities. It might, but it is an opinion, eh? What can you do? I think it's just betraying, you know, speaking of trust, that kind of expenditure, you know, for kind of pets causes is just wasting the resources and wealth that should be saved for future generations. And that's something that anyone can copy from Norway, right? We're not talking about cultures and traditions and whatever else. Look at how they manage the wealth they generate through oil, through a natural resource that they came upon very arbitrarily and without even consciously chasing after it. And look at how they channeled that wealth, that resource into the way they live now and into the way they save for future generations. I don't think you have to be Nordic to do that, even though I'm sure it helps. Speaking of the stainless steel version of the ultra thin, this is the non-limited version, lot 309. The US limited edition that was released in 2 runs of 100 units each has syringe hands and a very carefully matched luminous material between those hands and the indices. This one has sword hands. The unlimited edition has the sword hands inlaid with luminous material that's like a shade different from the luminous material that is used for the indices. Still the same beautiful black dial with the Sol Reverso branding at 12 o'clock and railway style minute track. There's no seconds hand or a subdial for the seconds for this version of the piece, as you had also seen from the 2011 version of the pink gold model at lot 308. This is lot 309, the Reverso ultra thin in stainless steel from 2011. That comes with its papers, and lot 309 was sold for $7,200 in US dollars. We have about 15 more minutes, by the way. So if you want to support the stream in any way, if you want to contribute, of course, YouTube offers a number of options, and some people have generously used that already. Ali Reza twice, Marine Layer, Jake Brooks, and of course, Maldives, all wonderful, long-standing contributors to the channel, and 3 of them members even as well. The membership gives you exclusive access to an ever-growing archive of videos that focus on getting the best deals on the markets. In fact, the whole existence of this channel is to make sure that you make better decisions with your hard-earned money at retail or on the secondary markets. The whole passion that drives this channel is to arm you with more knowledge on wristwatches and more ways to even learn more, so you can, in fact, make educated decisions about how to manage your collection or how to buy this or that watch. I offer that kind of help on a more personalized and sustained basis to many people behind the scenes as well. So if you want to perhaps take advantage of that kind of service, you should absolutely feel free to communicate directly with me. You can send me an email. You can contact me on Instagram. I'm Young Brando there as well, at young.brando on Instagram, at Young Brando here. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the like button. And if you want to support the channel, that monthly membership is a great option. There are many people in the chats who can, I think, testify to what they get out of it, what they learn from it as well. So for the last 10 minutes, I have a few more pieces that I want to take a look at here. I did make an implicit promise, thanks to iHeart Maldives' super chat, that I won't talk more about Patek. So that's why I'm passing silently over a lot of these very handsome looking watches indeed. But there will be time to talk Patek in future episodes. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Oh, wow. I thought my piece was the most non-military dial Royal Oak, but this kind of takes the cake. Was this something actually done in the factory? Very interesting, because it doesn't come with an extract, but the early number perhaps can testify to the exclusivity and authenticity of this, although that's not always so safe. The military dial itself was introduced for the Royal Oak at around the millennium, at around year 2000. And it gives the Royal Oak an aesthetic that is more akin to the Aquanaut than the Nautilus, let's say. One of the reasons I like the Aquanaut, as well as what I'm wearing now, the 14800, is that strap aesthetic rather than the bracelets. So the 14790, which is what you are looking at right here, is something that preserves the integrated bracelet aesthetic of the Royal Oak, although in a reduced size, in a reduced diameter, 36 millimeters in this case. This is all in stainless steel case, integrated bracelet, and octagonal bezel. However, that stainless steel octagonal bezel is set with brilliant cut diamonds. Each five brilliant cut diamonds is interrupted by that hexagonal bolt, which is rendered in white gold. The military dial is always accompanied with the broadsword hands and that arrow-tipped sweep center seconds. And the numbers themselves are inlaid in luminous material. Of course, that can be tritium if it's an early enough example, or in superluminova, which means it would still glow as mine does, which is something I really like and appreciate about this watch. Again, it says number 005 on the back, but the watch is not otherwise accompanied by papers or anything to testify to the factory authenticity of this watch. Memovox, thank you so much. 50 kroner. Memovox is a member as well, and as always, a very, very loyal contributor to this channel, so I appreciate it. Lot 409 for this reduced size Royal Oak with the military dial from around year 2000 in stainless steel with a diamond set bezel was sold for $24,000. Perhaps as the last watch for the night, we'll examine the watch that Memovox highlighted, lot 585. Yes. If you have any further questions, if you have any other requests, I would happily continue the live stream, even though we are almost at midnight, which is when I usually cut off. So feel free to send in another super chats. Oh, this is one of my absolute favorites. And look at the deal that some lucky SOB got on this. Parmigiani Fleurier, as you guys know, recently came into attention because they are up for sale. But as it happens, they have become available on the market. They have been offered up for sale by the Sandoz Foundation, Sandoz Family Foundation, that has so far sustained their existence precisely because they have become profitable. Parmigiani is one of those small to mid-size brands. They are not the youngest brands, so to speak, because they have been established, I think, in late 90s, I want to say 1996, by Michel Parmigiani with the Sandoz Family Foundation support. And nowadays they have an entire ecosystem, basically, in the traditional watchmaking city of Fleurier, where they have an integrated manufacturer that makes anything and everything, from dials to movement parts to cases, so on and so forth. And they exist also in close proximity as well as in collaboration at times with Beauvais Fleurier, as well as the higher manufacturer of Chopard, Chopard LUC, and Ferdinand Berthoud in Fleurier. Now, the brand has also been transformed quite significantly in the last few years. Michel Parmigiani has taken a back seat, at least as the public face of the brand. I think that may have been a commercial decision, but I think it also has to do with the fact that he's not necessarily getting younger. So a few years ago, they recruited Guido Terreni from Bulgari to lead the brand as its new CEO. And especially around their integrated bracelet watch, their sports watch, Tonda PF, they have seemed to gain some traction, some kind of hype to sell more watches. That's what made them profitable. But I have to say, the classic Tonda as well as the Toric has been my favorites. The Toric I especially love in the old school chronograph that you could see, of all people, on King Charles III's wrist. It was one of the watches that he had for quite some time, and something that he actually took to the throne as well. I love the Toric chronograph, but I also love the Toric perpetual calendar, which has actually a very interesting design. This is a white gold case with those teardrop lugs. It has that fluted bezel. That's one of the visual signatures of Parmigiani Fleurier. This one has an anthracite gray dial with salmon details, the biggest one of which is, of course, the downward-facing crescent, on which the date is indicated with a retrograde hand, with a crescent tip, as you can see here. That anthracite gray dial itself is distinguished by these radial grooves, which, including those salmon chapter ring, helps add some extra dimensionality to that dial. There's a moon phase indicator at 6 o'clock, quite detailed. A leap year indicator at 12 o'clock. The day of the week is in a vertical opening situated at 8 o'clock, and the date is at 4 o'clock and shown through a similar opening. The hands are very distinctly spear-shaped, and they match the salmon tones of the accents on the dial. And there's a sapphire cabochon that tops off the crown. The watch, again, has beautiful proportions. I think it's probably 11 and a half or so in terms of its thickness. which is very reasonable. It's not the slimmest perpetual calendar I've ever seen, but it's also quite sleek and very elegant. And here's a look into the movements, which has a gold rotor with the medallion logo of Parmigiani Fleurier and that grain d'orge or barley grain motif, which you can more recently see on the dials of those Tonda PF sports watches. As you can see, it is also framed by that case back ring, which has a fluted detail as well. So the case itself is very nicely finished and given a lot of tactile and visual detail that you expect to find at this level of high horology watch, but sometimes the bigger brands might fail to deliver you on that. Old school Parmigiani does not. This is not one of those earliest examples that uh, perhaps are even more desirable on the collector's market since they're associated with the proper name of Michel Parmigiani. But one of the better deals that you can get at this particular genre in this kind of complication on the secondary markets. This is lot number 585, highlighted by our friends Memovox of Denmark. It is a Parmigiani Fleurier toric perpetual calendar with a retrograde date indicator in white gold. I am realizing now that I gave you the thickness around 11.5 millimeter. I think the diameter of the case is right around 40 millimeters, maybe a smidgen over. This particular piece was also presented with a box, but no papers, and it sold for 15,600 US dollars, which again is a great deal for a perpetual calendar with a retrograde date indicator presented with such fine attention to detail. Absolutely. Yeah, the double coin edge finish is amazing. I was just about to sign off, but let's take a look at that chronograph very quickly. Toric, by the way, is a reference to those distinctive columns, Doric columns that were used in ancient Greek architecture, but were also translated into Roman architecture too. And that double stepped coin-edged or fluted bezels of the earlier toric models, even, the later examples are basically designed after the basis of those Doric columns. So that's hence the name toric for the model or the design. Okay, I don't know which one I'm going to bring up. I'm going to bring up both because there's one that's a sporty version and one that's a little more sober. This is the Tauric chronograph with the double-stepped bezel with the coin-edged or fluted decoration. Black dial, Roman numerals. The watch is actually powered by the Zenit caliber 400 base. As you know, quite a popular base movement for an automatic chronograph when it comes to luxury watches. From the Rolex Daytona between the years 1988 to 2000 to the self-winding chronographs of Daniel Roth, for example, and these Parmigiani Fleurier Tauric pieces. The watch that you are currently looking at, again, as I mentioned, is the dressier version of the Tauric chronograph, rendered in white gold with a 40mm case. I think, okay, that listing didn't have the case back, but here is a look at the case back as well. And as you see, that double-stepped coin-edged framing exists around the movement as well. Once again, the crown is topped with a sapphire cabochon. Beautiful piece. And they're also kind of a sportier renderings of the dial with Arabic numerals instead of the Roman, as you can see here, with an ice blue dial with contrasting black chronograph registers and a black minute track as well. A platinum piece this time around. Beautiful, really. I mean, the Tauric case design is just an absolute stunner and quite a classic too. I mean, the teardrop lugs and the coin-edged detail, whether it is in the more simplified version or in this double-stepped design, is amazing. The Zenit caliber 400 is one of the reliable and popular renditions of the self-winding chronograph movement in the modern age. This is just a cool design. I do prefer the Roman numerals and the dressier design, but this is not too bad either. In both versions, since people have started recognizing the brand, since people have realized that who was then Prince Charles of Wales and who is now King Charles III is wearing a version of this chronograph, the prices started going up. There's quite a bit more premium attached to these Tauric chronographs of late, but I'm sure they will come back in some shape or form as well. So the perpetual calendar examples of the Tauric are even better deals. Memovox. Yeah, the double step dial, if you can, sorry, the double stepped bezel for the toric is even more interesting. But you know, you can't always get what you want, as the song says. And that brings us to the end of our stream today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to those of you, especially, who have so generously contributed through Super Chats. Alireza, Marine Layer, Jake Brooks, I Heart Maldives, Memovox. I hope you guys have gotten nice, full answers and deep, penetrating insights into your questions. If you haven't, feel free to ask them again and again. You can always reach me also immediately and personally on Instagram at young.brando. And please do follow. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do, because I have watch-related content on a daily basis. Hit the like button on your way out. That always helps. If you want to support the channel in other ways, YouTube offers a few options, but there are links for alternatives in the video description as well. Love you all. It's great to be with you. I'll see you tomorrow for the nightly live stream as well. And hopefully, in the meantime, I'll share you some more watch-related content here on YouTube and Instagram. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. Goodbye.